Mill called CPS on me to try getting my newborn taken away, because she wanted my infertile Sil to raise him instead. Then she started showing up unannounced and stealing baby items from my house, so my husband kicked her out. From the beginning, I knew my relationship with my mother-in-law was going to be complicated. I had heard stories from my husband, but nothing could have prepared me for how things unfolded. You see, my mother-in-law has 2 sons, my husband Charles and his older brother Ethan. From a very young age, mother-in-law liked to make all the decisions regarding the family. She had a hand in everything. What they ate, what they wore, and even the careers her sons pursued. At first, I admired her for being so involved and dedicated to her family. It seemed like everything ran smoothly because of her, but that admiration quickly faded when she began trying to control my life, too. Before I entered the picture, mother-in-law was already very close with her other daughter-in-law, sister-in-law. Let's call her Joanne. Joanne was practically worshipped in mother-in-law's eyes. She was the perfect wife for her oldest son, Ethan. And as if their relationship wasn't already unsettling, mother-in-law had been best friends with Joanne's mother for years. They were inseparable, like 2 sides of the same coin. In fact, my husband once told me that when he and Joanne were kids, mother-in-law used to joke about how they should get married one day. It was clear that in mother-in-law's mind, Charles and Joanne were meant to be together, but life didn't go according to her plans, and Charles chose me instead. So, guess who became the target of mother-in-law's unresolved anger? Me. From the moment Charles and I started dating, it was like I had disrupted this perfect little fantasy world she had built in her head. She would make passive-aggressive comments about how close Joanne was to the family and how difficult it must be for me coming into such a tight-knit circle. It was one of those relationships where you felt like an outsider before you even had a chance to prove yourself. Charles had mentioned, almost nonchalantly, how obsessed his mom was with Joanne, even before Joanne and Ethan got married. He'd laugh about how they would spend hours on the phone talking about everything from recipes to holiday plans. Joanne and her mother would join mother-in-law on shopping trips, weekend getaways, and even family vacations. It was like they were one big, happy family, and the rest of us were just there watching from the sidelines. Mother-in-law had no problem comparing me to Joanne. How she had better taste, better social skills, and always knew how to fit in. Joanne was mother-in-law's golden standard. And no matter what I did, I couldn't measure up. It wasn't even subtle. Mother-in-law would throw out little barbs like Joanne would have handled this better, or Joanne knows how to take care of things without needing help. It was exhausting, but I tried not to let it get to me. I thought that once I married Charles, her son, and showed her that I was committed, things would change. But I quickly realized mother-in-law had made up her mind long before that. In her eyes, I wasn't Joanne, and that was enough for her to treat me like an outsider in my own family. Joanne was part of the family's legacy, a picture-perfect daughter-in-law, while I was just an inconvenience. When Charles and I announced our engagement, I remember her reaction clearly. It felt like a disappointing event for her. She barely masked her disapproval, wearing a thin, fake smile and offering a sarcastic congratulations. I'll never forget the snarky comment she threw at me. "Well, you won the lottery." As if Charles marrying me was some kind of mistake or fluke, and I should be eternally grateful. The wedding was a nightmare. She made it obvious that she was disinterested the whole time, barely participating in any of the preparations, unless it was to criticize something. Even when I tried to include her by taking her wedding dress shopping, she somehow managed to turn it into a disaster. Guess who she brought with her? Joanne. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she just wanted to have someone there she felt comfortable with, but that illusion was shattered when she mocked every gown I tried on. She'd laugh and whisper to Joanne about how unflattering the dresses looked on me. And then she'd encourage Joanne to try one on instead, saying, "You'd look so much better." I could barely hide my frustration. Mother-in-law took every opportunity to undermine me on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Things came to a head when Charles had to intervene. After watching his mother's behavior, he took her aside and made it clear she needed to respect our decisions and stop treating me like I was second-rate. Of course, mother-in-law played innocent, pretending she had no idea her behavior was hurtful. But I could see it in her eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. After the wedding, I thought things might calm down, but I couldn't have been more wrong. When I got pregnant, I thought for sure mother-in-law's attitude would shift. I was carrying her first grandchild, after all. I naively believed that would soften her heart, that maybe this baby would be the bridge to finally bring us together. But instead of excitement or support, I got criticism and coldness. Mother-in-law was livid. Although she never said it outright, I could feel her resentment in the way she spoke to me, her passive-aggressive remarks about how it was too soon for us to have a baby and how Joanne and Ethan were still waiting for the right time. It was almost like she thought Joanne was the one who should have had this baby, not me. Then came the bombshell. Joanne and Ethan had been trying to conceive for years, and they had finally gotten the results of some fertility tests. The diagnosis was devastating. Joanne would never be able to have biological children. My heart broke for her, no matter what had happened between us. I could imagine how painful that news must have been for her, especially after trying for so long. I reached out to offer my support, but Joanne was too distraught to talk. I understood and gave her the space she needed to process the news. But while everyone was processing Joanne's devastating news, mother-in-law's attitude towards me became even more toxic. It was like she blamed me for being pregnant, as if my ability to conceive was some sort of insult to Joanne's struggles. She began to escalate her passive-aggressive behavior, making snide comments about how I wasn't considering Joanne's feelings. Every time I mentioned the baby or discussed preparations, mother-in-law would either change the subject or make me feel guilty for being pregnant. She'd say things like, "Joanne would have been such a great mother," completely ignoring my presence. It became clear that in her mind, Joanne deserved this baby more than I did. I was just an obstacle standing in the way of what mother-in-law believed should have been Joanne's motherhood journey. It wasn't just hurtful comments, though. Mother-in-law took every opportunity to undermine me during my pregnancy. She'd show up unannounced at our house, criticize the choices I was making for the nursery, question the baby clothes we had picked out, and even monitor my diet, telling me what I should and shouldn't be eating. Nothing I did was right in her eyes. If I bought something pink for the baby, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Blue would have been better." Joanne would have picked blue. If I mentioned how tired I was, she'd brush it off with a dismissive pregnancy as nothing. Joanne would have handled it like a pro. One particular incident sticks out in my mind. Mother-in-law came over one afternoon to help with the nursery. I had just finished putting together the crib and was excited to show her. But instead of even acknowledging the effort I had put in, she walked into the room, took one look, and immediately started criticizing everything. "This crib, it's way too plain. Joanne would have gone for something more elegant, and these colors, too bright, don't you think? Joanne would have chosen softer tones." Her constant comparisons were exhausting. And Charles, bless him, tried his best to step in and defend me. He confronted his mother, telling her that she was overstepping and that she needed to stop. But as always, mother-in-law brushed him off, claiming she was only trying to help. We both knew that wasn't true. She was punishing me. Not just for being pregnant, but for the fact that Joanne couldn't be. And deep down, I think mother-in-law resented me for being the one to give her a grandchild, something she had always envisioned Joanne doing first. As my due date got closer, mother-in-law's behavior only worsened. She became more aggressive in her attempts to control the situation. One evening, she even suggested that Joanne should be in the delivery room with us, saying she deserves to be a part of this since she'll never get the chance to experience it herself. I was speechless. The audacity of her suggestion left me fuming, but I held my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene. But Charles wasn't having any of it. He shut mother-in-law down immediately, telling her that this was our moment and Joanne had no place in the delivery room. Mother-in-law's response was typical. She played the victim, claiming she was only trying to include Joanne out of compassion, but I could see through her act. It was all about control, about making sure Joanne still felt superior even in a situation where she had no right to be involved. I knew then that no matter what I did, mother-in-law would never accept me as part of the family. I wasn't Joanne, and that was all she cared about. The worst part was that mother-in-law's behavior wasn't just affecting me. It was putting a strain on my marriage. Charles was caught in the middle, torn between standing up for me and trying to maintain a relationship with his mother. But I could see it was wearing on him. He was starting to realize that his mother's obsession with Joanne wasn't just harmless favoritism. It was toxic, and it was slowly poisoning our family. Things got worse after my baby was born. I remember the moment mother-in-law first laid eyes on my son. There was no warmth in her expression. Instead, I saw something unsettling, like she was calculating. All of a sudden, it was as if my baby didn't belong to me. In her mind, he was meant for Joanne. She started making comments about how heartbreaking it must be for Joanne to watch us with our child, and she even suggested that we should spend more time with Joanne to share the joy and make her feel included. At first, I thought it was just mother-in-law being her usual manipulative, overbearing self, but then she crossed a line I never expected. She started making strange comments about how Joanne was meant to be a mother and how some people just aren't cut out for it. I didn't understand what she was getting at until one day my husband overheard her on the phone telling someone, probably Joanne's mother, that she was thinking about calling Child Protective Services, CPS. I was in shock. She was actually planning to take my baby away from me for Joanne. I thought it was just an empty threat. But a few days later, a CPS caseworker showed up at our door. The allegations were vague: neglect, emotional instability, and unfit parenting. It was all complete nonsense, but just enough to raise suspicion. Mother-in-law had actually gone through with it. She called CPS trying to get our child taken away. I was floored. The caseworker was polite but distant, clearly just following protocol. But the fact that they were even there at all was terrifying. My husband, for the first time, looked genuinely afraid. We had never imagined something like this could happen. But here we were, being investigated because my mother-in-law was so obsessed with her other daughter-in-law that she was willing to destroy our family to fulfill her fantasy. The worst part, mother-in-law didn't even try to hide it. A few days later, she sent me a text. "I hope you understand I'm only doing this for the baby's best interests." It was chilling. She genuinely believed that somehow taking my child away from me and giving him to Joanne was the moral thing to do. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The audacity, the cruelty, it was beyond anything I had imagined. My mind has literally gone blank because what am I even supposed to do? I feel like I'm actually neglecting my baby because of all this. As the CPS investigation is dragging on, I'm becoming more and more paranoid. I'm constantly worried that every small mistake could be twisted into something bigger. I'm just constantly on edge. Charles tried to reassure me, but we both know that mother-in-law isn't going to stop until she gets what she wants. The one and only thing I know is that I am not letting anybody take my baby away from me. If my mother-in-law thinks that I would just roll over and let this happen, then she is very, very wrong. I know you guys have some golden advice, and I could really use some. Thanks. Update 1. I didn't think things could get worse after the CPS visit, but of course, mother-in-law and Joanne had other plans. In the days that followed, it felt like I was being stalked in my own home. Joanne started showing up at our house unannounced, each time more invasive than the last. One time, she pushed past me and went straight to the baby's room, picking him up without asking, holding him like he was already hers. It was like she saw my baby as her property, a sick fantasy of what her life should have been. My heart raced every time she touched him, and I struggled to keep my composure. And then there was mother-in-law. She was relentless, dropping by with gifts Joanne had picked out for the baby, making comments that felt more like threats. She kept talking about how Joanne deserved this child, how I should share the joy and be more understanding of Joanne's situation. It wasn't about sharing, though. It was about taking. Mother-in-law had already made up her mind. In her eyes, this wasn't my child anymore. It was Joanne's. It wasn't just psychological warfare, either. Things started disappearing from the house. Baby clothes, toys, blankets. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. But then I realized Joanne had been taking these items piece by piece, like she was building her own nursery. That wasn't even the worst part. One evening, I noticed her car parked across the street from our house. She was watching us, watching me. My skin crawled every time I saw her sitting there, staring, like she was waiting for the moment to strike. Mother-in-law and Joanne escalated quickly after that. They started coming together, treating my home like it was theirs. I'll never forget the night they both barged in while Charles was out. Mother-in-law sat at my kitchen table and said in the most condescending voice imaginable that I should think of the bigger picture. She outright told me that Joanne deserved this baby more than I did and that I could always try again. I was speechless, shaking with rage. I made it clear that they had done enough damage to my family, and if they didn't leave at once, I was calling the police. After they left, I couldn't shake the fear that this wasn't over. Mother-in-law was determined to win. And now Joanne was just as obsessed. A few days later, CPS called, scheduling another unannounced visit. I felt like I was being hunted. No matter what I did, mother-in-law would find a way to undermine me. My nerves were shot, and every day felt like a battle just to keep my family together. But then something happened, something I hadn't expected. Joanne's sudden appearances stopped. She went from showing up every other day to completely disappearing. Mother-in-law too became oddly silent. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, but I didn't trust it. It wasn't until Charles got to know through his cousin about a conversation between his brother, Ethan, and mother-in-law that I started to understand what was going on. Apparently, Joanne had been having breakdowns, struggling with anxiety, and even fighting with Ethan. All of mother-in-law's scheming, all of her manipulation was starting to unravel. Ethan, who had always stood by mother-in-law, was furious. Joanne's obsession was taking a toll on their marriage. And Ethan was starting to see mother-in-law for what she really was, a meddling, overbearing woman who had pushed her agenda too far. I honestly sympathize with Joanne's condition. But that is not enough of a reason for me to forgive her right away. Although manipulated, she was our mother-in-law's accomplice and left no stone unturned to make sure I was shaken. I hope she gets better, but I would prefer to have no relations with her and my mother-in-law moving forward. My sole focus now is to focus on my baby. I read through all of the comments you guys wrote under my post, and they have been really helpful. I'm trying my best to put up a strong front. I will let you guys know if anything else happens. Update 2. After days of turmoil, I'm relieved to say that the CPS case has officially been closed. The caseworkers found no substantial evidence to support the claims mother-in-law made. And after speaking to a few family members, they started to get the full picture of what was really going on. The officers couldn't ignore mother-in-law's toxic involvement. And once they saw how everything tied back to her, they realized this was more about a family feud than any actual concerns for our baby's well-being. Legally, we were in the clear. The investigation was closed with no further concerns, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. But while the CPS nightmare was over, the fallout from mother-in-law's actions was just beginning. And the damage she had caused was starting to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. It's been a few weeks since the CPS case was officially closed. And while the relief still lingers, the fallout from mother-in-law's actions has only grown. The tension within the family is palpable. And the cracks in mother-in-law's facade are impossible to ignore. Ethan and Joanne's relationship is on the verge of collapse. And mother-in-law is starting to realize that the very thing she was trying to protect, her perfect vision of her family, is falling apart right in front of her. When CPS cleared us, I thought maybe we'd finally get a break, a moment of peace to just enjoy being new parents. But of course, mother-in-law wasn't about to let things go that easily. Once she realized she had lost control over us, she scrambled to regain it in her most predictable way, by playing the victim. Charles's aunt, who has stayed in touch with us, mentioned that mother-in-law had been making the rounds, calling up extended family members and spinning this ridiculous soap story about how she was only trying to protect the family. She cried about how none of us appreciated her sacrifices or the lengths she went to in order to do the right thing. It was almost laughable, except this time nobody was buying it. Even her staunchest supporters, who had once clung to every word she said, were beginning to see her for what she truly was, a manipulative woman who had pushed things way too far. The whispers about how she had betrayed her own son and daughter-in-law by calling CPS were starting to spread. People who used to defend her were distancing themselves, no longer willing to turn a blind eye to her behavior. But the real shock came when Ethan and Joanne decided to take some time apart. Joan, who had always been mother-in-law's greatest ally, finally admitted to Ethan that she was overwhelmed by everything mother-in-law had encouraged her to do. She wasn't blind to the fact that mother-in-law's obsession with control had fueled her own toxic behavior, and it had taken a severe toll on her mental health. According to Charles, his brother was furious. He blamed mother-in-law for all of it. He accused her of driving a wedge between him and Joanne, of filling Joanne's head with unrealistic expectations and poisonous ideas, and of pushing her to get involved in our lives in ways that were hurtful and destructive. It was hard not to feel a little satisfaction at seeing the fallout from mother-in-law's manipulation. She had tried to destroy my family, but in the end, it was her own relationships that were crumbling. Ethan stopped taking her calls, and when she tried to show up at his house unannounced, her favorite tactic, he refused to let her in. Joanne had even moved out temporarily, staying with her parents to figure things out. Ethan later told Charles that the silence from his mother was deafening and that mother-in-law didn't know how to handle being ignored. For the first time, she wasn't the one calling the shots, and it was eating her alive. Of course, mother-in-law didn't just sit back and accept this. She tried to reach out to us again under the guise of making amends. She sent flowers, left voicemails, even tried to show up at our house unannounced like she always did. But this time, Charles and I stood firm. We weren't playing her game anymore. We didn't respond to the flowers, ignored the voicemails, and when she showed up at the door, I didn't even open it. She spent a solid 10 minutes banging on the door, but I just stood there, watching from the window, waiting for her to leave. The desperation in her actions was obvious. Mother-in-law had always been the queen bee, the one who controlled everything. But now she was realizing that no one was following her lead anymore. Joanne wasn't coming to her for advice. Ethan was cutting her out of his life, and Charles and I had set boundaries that she couldn't break through. For the first time, mother-in-law was truly alone. And then karma dealt its final blow. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that mother-in-law's reputation in the wider community was starting to unravel, too. Word had gotten out about the CPS investigation. And while most people didn't know the full story, they knew enough to start questioning mother-in-law's character. She had always prided herself on being the matriarch of a perfect family. But now her perfect image was tainted. People were talking, and mother-in-law hated it. She was no longer seen as the strong, capable woman who held her family together. Instead, she was the overbearing mother-in-law who had tried to tear her family apart. What struck me the most, though, was the silence that followed. Mother-in-law, who had once been in constant contact with everyone in the family, was suddenly quiet. No more surprise visits, no more phone calls. Even the constant stream of texts and guilt-tripping messages stopped. It was like she had finally realized that no one was listening to her anymore. While I know this isn't the end, mother-in-law has a way of bouncing back when you least expect it. I can't help but feel a sense of justice. For so long, I had felt powerless, suffocated by her manipulation and control. But now, things are different. The tables have turned. Mother-in-law is reaping what she sowed, and for the first time I feel like I can breathe. I read the comments, and I saw many of you suggesting getting a restraining order against her, and believe me, guys, if this escalates any further, that is definitely going to be our next step. Thank you for following my story for so long. I am truly grateful for all of you. Update 3, Hi Reddit. It's been quite the journey since I first posted here, and I can't believe I'm finally writing what will likely be the final update. So much has happened, and I want to thank everyone for all the support, advice, and encouragement over these past few weeks. I never expected to find so much comfort in sharing my story with strangers on the internet, but you all have been amazing. Now, let me dive into the latest, and trust me, it's a lot. To start, the biggest incident happened just a few days ago. Charles's aunt, who has been supportive throughout this entire ordeal, came by to visit us. Everything seemed normal at first. We've had her over before, and she's always been good to us. But then, as she walked through the door, someone else followed behind her. It was mother-in-law. Apparently, she'd come along without even telling us. I wasn't ready for it, but I guess in hindsight, I should have expected something like this. As soon as she stepped into our house, I could tell something was different. Gone was the overconfident, manipulative woman who had caused so much chaos in our lives. In her place was someone I barely recognized, desperate, teary-eyed, and broken. She didn't even give us a chance to say anything before she dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Mother-in-law started begging, yes, actually begging, to be part of our son's life. She went on and on about how she had made mistakes, how she didn't mean for things to go this far, and how much she regretted her actions. At first, I was in shock. Here was this woman who had tried to ruin our lives, who had literally called CPS on us to take away our baby, now groveling at our feet, asking for forgiveness. But before I could even respond, Charles stepped forward. And let me tell you, I have never been prouder of him than I was in that moment. Charles looked his mother straight in the eye, and with a calm but firm voice, he told her exactly what needed to be said. He told her that she had crossed so many lines, done so much damage, and that we were done. Charles was emotional, but he didn't hesitate when he said that there was no coming back from what she had done. She doesn't get to manipulate us anymore. After everything she had put us through, she does not get to be a part of our lives. Mother-in-law's face crumbled, and for a split second, I actually felt a twinge of pity for her. But then I remembered everything, how she tried to take my baby, how she manipulated Joanne and Ethan, and how she nearly tore our family apart. That pity vanished as quickly as it came. She didn't deserve our forgiveness, and Charles made that crystal clear. After what felt like an eternity of her pleading, Charles's aunt finally stood up and escorted mother-in-law out of the house. He also said that this was the last warning she was going to get, because if she was seen in this neighborhood ever again, we would get a restraining order against her. It was a surreal moment watching her leave, still sniffling and clutching at her aunt like a lifeline. I half expected her to try one last attempt to guilt us into letting her back in. But she didn't. She just left, defeated. And for the first time, I felt like we had truly closed that chapter of our lives. But it didn't end there. Charles has been in touch with his brother Ethan throughout this whole ordeal, and there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. Many of you asked about Joanne after my last update, and while she hasn't been around, we've learned a lot about what's been going on with her. Ethan and I talked, and he explained that Joanne hasn't been doing well emotionally. After everything that happened, she's been too embarrassed to face us, and I can't really blame her for that. The other day, we invited Ethan and Joanne over to talk things out, but when the day came, only Ethan showed up. He told us that Joanne was too ashamed to come, but he wanted to give us her side of the story. And honestly, it was even more complicated than I had imagined. Remember when I told you guys that mother-in-law and Joanne's mom were close friends? Well, that bond gave mother-in-law a lot of control over Joanne's life from a young age. Joanne's mother was often absent, and she relied on mother-in-law for advice and guidance. What Joanne didn't realize, though, was that mother-in-law was manipulating her from the very beginning. Apparently, when Charles and I started dating, mother-in-law began planting seeds of doubt in Joanne's mind. She told her things like, she's just trying to take Charles away from the family, or, she's going to use you and your family to get what she wants. Joanne, desperate for approval from her one and only mentor, believed every word of it. Ethan explained that Joanne always wanted kids. She was devastated when she found out she couldn't have them. And the fact that I was pregnant at the same time only added fuel to the fire. Mother-in-law, of course, played on Joanne's insecurities, convincing her that I was the enemy. Joanne was so caught up in mother-in-law's manipulations that she couldn't see what was really happening. And when mother-in-law suggested that they call CPS to protect the baby, Joanne went along with it, thinking it was the only way to make things right. Listening to Ethan, I realized that Joanne was just as much a victim of mother-in-law's manipulation as I was, though in a different way. She had been conditioned to believe that mother-in-law had her best interests at heart. But in reality, mother-in-law was only using her to further her own twisted agenda. Ethan didn't expect us to forgive Joanne for what she did. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ready to. But he wanted us to know that she's not the same person she was when all of this started. She's in therapy now, trying to unravel the years of manipulation she suffered at the hands of mother-in-law. Ethan also admitted that the whole situation nearly drove him and Joanne to divorce. He was furious when he found out how deep mother-in-law's influence went, and it nearly destroyed their marriage. But now they're trying to work through it. They've started couples therapy, and Ethan says it's been helping. I think it's the best thing they can do right now. If they're going to move forward, they need to rebuild their relationship from the ground up. I told Ethan that while I'm not ready to forgive Joanne yet, I hope she finds the peace and healing she needs. Talking with Ethan only reinforced our decision to cut mother-in-law out of our lives completely. She had been pulling the strings for too long, and we couldn't let her have any more control over our family. This wasn't just about protecting ourselves anymore. It was about breaking the cycle of manipulation that mother-in-law had created. There's one more thing I wanted to share with all of you. Charles and I have decided to move to a new city. Charles recently got a new job offer, and honestly, I couldn't be prouder of him. He nailed the interview even with everything that's been going on, and we both feel like this is the fresh start we needed. We've done our research, and the new city has everything we're looking for: great schools, daycares, hospitals, and best of all, it's far away from mother-in-law. I can't even begin to tell you how much I'm looking forward to this move. It feels like the final step in reclaiming our lives from the chaos that mother-in-law created. We'll be able to raise our son in a healthier environment, surrounded by people who genuinely care about us and aren't trying to control our every move. I'm excited for the future in a way I haven't been in a long time. Before I wrap this up, I just want to say thank you, Reddit. You've been with me every step of the way, offering support, advice, and encouragement when I needed it the most. I don't think I could have gotten through all of this without you. From the CPS scare to mother-in-law's manipulations to finally taking back control of our lives, you've been there, cheering us on. I'm grateful beyond words. So, here's to a fresh start, free from mother-in-law's toxic influence. Here's to healing, to growth, and to moving forward. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: we're going to be okay. Thanks for caring and encouraging us through this wild ride.